Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the Dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for this day.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
Hey, thanks for listening. This is Ross Kenyon. I'm the host of Reversing Climate Change, the podcast you are listening to right at this very moment. Before we get into the bulk of today's show, I'd love to tell you about our sponsors, Absolute Climate and Philip Lee LLP. I've made great radio with both of them. They should be familiar to you if you listen to this show, but I want to tell you about why you should learn a little bit more. The first sponsor is Absolute Climate. I did a show with their founder, Peter Miner, a few months back, and a lot of people love that show. I was asking a question of, can registries design their own methodologies for carbon markets without it being a conflict of interest? And Absolute Climate's thesis is no, they shouldn't be in the business of doing that. We actually need to disintegrate functionality within carbon markets even further. They are literally the only independent standards body for carbon removal that exists. Their name is very well chosen. I think they are some of the most aggressively idealistic people within carbon removal. It's come up on Reversing Climate Change so many times about how and why there's tension between commercial teams and science teams within carbon markets. There's some fundamental tension between the rules of running a business, or I should say, the rules of running a profitable business is maybe a better way to put that, and climate impact. And I think Absolute is one of those companies that, at least from my experience and what I know of them over there, I think they're going to be some of the staunchest holdouts, just trying to make sure that there can be a justified true belief that a ton purchased is a ton truly removed. They're betting big on not compromising. It's a bold strategy. I respect the absolute hell out of that. Absolute is very much doing things their own way, and they stand out to me, and I will never mistake them in a lineup. Go check them out. I really am endlessly fascinated by what they're doing. And that's also true of our other sponsor, Philip Lee LLP. In fact, I told them to pitch me on some weirder legal shows. I really like doing shows about the law. I think the law is such a fascinating part of our shared social life. It structures so much of it. It's badly understood by most people. And just structuring deals within carbon removal is hard. I'm talking grown-up deals here. Like when you're trying to put together an enormous package complicated structuring, a lot of money changing hands. The stakes are high. You really do need a good lawyer. I'm sorry to tell you that if you are a startup out there in carbon removal, you're going to probably pay a fair amount of money to lawyers. There's just no way around it. Your choice is basically, do you get a bad lawyer or a good lawyer? One really cool thing I can say on Philip Lee LLP's behalf, well, one, Ryan Covington and I did a very fun show about how basically no one except for an elite few really know what bankability and project finance even mean. And he lays it out very clearly. If you'd like to go listen to that show, it's awesome and it's linked in the show notes. And also we ended up talking about Ernest Hemingway a fair amount too. So it keeps with the tradition of reversing climate change. One also really cool thing is that they just won Environmental Finance's VCM Law Firm of the Year. They won it 3 years in a row, 2023, 2024, and 2025. It's the only award for legal teams operating in the VCM, and they have offices in the US, Europe, and the UK. You should check out Philip Lee LLP. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to this, and thank you to our sponsors. You really make this so that it's something that in a busy life with lots of competing priorities, I'm able to keep coming back and making more reversing climate change. Thanks so much for what you do. And now, here is the show. Hey, thanks for listening to the Reversing Climate Change podcast. I'm the host, Ross Kenyon. Today, we have a regular to the show, a true legend of carbon removal, Grant Faber. I'll tell you about what we're talking about today. First, before I do, a little opportunity for you. If you want to be a paid subscriber, it's $5 a month. It gets rid of all the ads and Spotify adds in. You get bonus content, and it supports the show a great deal. Short of that, if you're willing to open up your podcast app right now, give Reversing Climate Change a full rating, write a review that's positive if you can. It helps a lot. It only takes like 30 seconds, and it means a lot. But whatever you choose to do, here's the intro for Grant. Grant is formerly of the Department of Energy, working on carbon removal. We did a show about that. I'll put a link at the show notes. And if you're in Spotify, you can just go look at the episodes that are linked to through this episode. Grant compiled a list for data analysis of 700 carbon removal companies. Almost all of the companies, as far as he can discern, except for the many artisanal biochar producers, those who are making biochar equipment. Besides those, he's pretty confident that nearly all of the carbon removal companies that exist are represented on this list. It's fascinating to look at the numerical values here, to do actual quantitative analysis of the space, and seeing all these numbers analyzed in this way caused me to think some new thoughts and give additional texture to my thinking about carbon removal. The link to Grant's work cataloging this data, your ability to access it, to play with it, it's all in the show notes. Go check it out. And here is your show with Grant Faber. Grant, you're back again.
Yes, I am, Ross. Yes, I am.
You have an extremely comprehensive list of, how confident are you that this represents 100% of all carbon removal companies in the world?
Well, I am 100% confident that it does not represent 100% of carbon removal companies in the world, but I am 90% confident that it represents at least 90% of all carbon removal companies in the world that are not artisanal biochar or biochar equipment manufacturing companies. But everyone else that does durable carbon removal should hopefully be on this list or shortly represented via crowdsourcing.
It's amazing that if you are only confident that this represents 90% of those companies, you can't figure that out. Who else could possibly figure that out? That is the data just that heterogeneous? It's just that fragmented you just can't find it?
Yeah. So interestingly, how I built this list, similar to how I built the director capture company list a year and a half ago or so, is I took every database, every other database of all DAC companies and every other list from Frontier and XPRI, CDR.FYI, and so forth, Circular Carbon Network, and combined all of them that I could find, at least all the active companies. So I did that for DAC. Now I've done it for CDR. So I'd say that it's comprehensive in the sense that it includes all the active companies from these other lists, so should definitionally be the most comprehensive out there. But it gets really challenging, I would say, particularly for biochar, because there are just so many existing very small biochar outfits out there. And really just for tractability and to focus on making the list a little bit more meaningful, I had to exclude artisanal biochar. So just, because anybody can buy a $200 like little Kontiki kiln and just light some biomass on fire and make biochar. And then it's not that much of a step up to then call that a company or form an LLC or something around that. So I had to make some exclusions. But yeah, I would say even though I scoured biochar member directories or biochar trade group directories and things of that nature, it was still, there are probably still some biochar companies, non-artisanal, that are missing from the list that are just so hard to wrap my head around. But everything else should be pretty tightly wrapped up.
I'm looking at the companies by technology section on the analysis tab. And like if you go to the very bottom, there's one company each for river alkalinity, pit lake alkalinity, and oceanic bioslurry. I know who each of those companies are, but as you go to the very top of the list here, 295 biochar companies that represents 42.1% of all companies in carbon removal. That's a very big spread there, I think it's fair to say.
Definitely. Yeah, it was huge. And I wasn't totally surprised going into it, just because the barriers to entry to doing biochar are just smaller than a lot of these other pathways. And there are a notable amount of DAC companies. I did split DAC among solid sorbent, liquid solvent, membrane, and so forth. But yeah, so there's maybe something. There's looking at the top of the list, 176 DAC companies. But yeah, it's still just blown away by biochar, which is far and away the most common company type. But I will note that the data for some of these companies is perhaps a bit skewed in terms of the totals, in the sense that a biochar company may only be doing a few thousand tons of removal per year, relative to DAC or ERW or BEX companies that are in many cases aiming to do hundreds of thousands, millions of tons of CDR per year going forward. So there's a much larger proportion of individual biochar companies that are trying to do their thing, but due to biomass limitations or just the other ways that those businesses came to be, in a lot of cases, each individual company is probably aiming for a much smaller amount of annual removal, at least at first.
Huh. Where do you cut off artisanal? Where does industrial biochar actually start in your taxonomy?
So some may argue that I made a bit of an arbitrary distinction here, but essentially, if anyone uses some kind of Kontiki kiln, or it's just if it was very apparent to me when reviewing the company's website that they were just using a small open air kiln where you just more or less combust the biomass and then scoop up the remaining ash. And in those cases, I classify those as more artisanal. There's probably more rigorous definitions out there, but in general, I tried to only include companies that were using official large scale, like more industrial biochar, pyrolysis or gasification kilns or equipment. So yeah, if a company uses equipment from a company like Pyreg or something like that, then and if there can be sufficient, say, emissions controls on that process, if it's actually seemed feasible to me that, well, okay, this process could track and try to mitigate methane emissions that could arise from the pyrolysis process. It's like, okay, this is more of an industrial operation that will be suitable for large scale, durable CDR crediting, or medium to large scale CDR crediting, as opposed to small artisanal operations that may be primarily for the purpose of just making and selling the biochar, not necessarily creating carbon credits.
Well, if there's one thing I associate you with, it's being an edge case lord. Is that what an edge lord is, by the way? If so, that's what you are, Grant.
Yes. Actual dictionary definition.
We're reclaiming this term now. Grant as the edgelord supreme. Surely you tortured yourself. I'm sure someone has a Kontiki that they've rigged up, or they have some sort of pyrolysis device that they got from an OEM that they improved in some way, where you're like, oh crap, this is somewhere between the two categories. So how much sleep did you lose trying to deal with that?
I lost a fair amount of sleep, to be totally honest. I've been thinking about this list and working on it, and that's not even a joke. I literally was up in bed, could not fall asleep when I was building this list, thinking about how should I make that cutoff. And it's challenging. I would say that if there are folks out there who can make a rigorous argument and want to submit their company to the forum, to be added to the list and can make an argument that their operation really is for the express purpose of carbon dioxide removal rather than just a very small scale biochar operation, then I might be open-minded. But it's challenging because if I allow one artisanal in, then every other artisanal person in the world could come along and say, well, why are they in and I'm not in? And it just could challenge the list a bit. So I had to make, I hate to say it, but I had to make a partially arbitrary cutoff at determination, which pains me. But in terms of companies that I have relative confidence could be medium to large scale suppliers of durable carbon dioxide removal credits verified under existing standards that could be sold and used in like corporate or national emissions inventories, I hope that this list does a good job at capturing such companies.
All right. Even with so many biochar companies winnowed out of the main enormous list, you still have nearly 300 companies. 42.1% of carbon removal that's taking place is in biochar, non-artisanal biochar. It's an enormous number. What do you make of it being, an order of magnitude bigger than the next category of solid sorbent DAC?
Yeah, I've speculated on this for some time. I think it's one thing that really benefits biochar is that similar in some sense to ag liming for ERW, that there was already an existing knowledge base around it. People were already making biochar for various uses for decades before we really had a conception that, okay, this is going to be a perhaps major component of the durable carbon dioxide removal portfolio. So I think that existing knowledge base, existing technology, I believe I've seen some reports from some international biochar groups that indicate that actually the majority of biochar that's produced today, carbon credits are not sold coupled to that biochar. It's just made for its agricultural benefits or other purposes as outlined in books like Burn. And so, yeah, I think that has created a tremendous advantage. Whereas for DAC companies, even though DAC is the second most common of the four main pathways featured on this list, those companies essentially all came to be in the last several years, with the exception of the major incumbents like Climeworks and Carbon Engineering, which have been around for 10 or 15 years. But the vast majority of DAC companies have really spun up in the past 5 to 10 years. So yeah, it's that's to do with that existing knowledge base, I think.
I'm surprised to see the number of DAC companies here as well. I guess if you tallied them all up, I'm wondering across all DAC, how much does it represent?
So I think at the top of the list, it notes that DAC companies are 25% of the overall total. So right now the list is sitting at an even 700 companies. And so DAC is about 180, so about 25% or a quarter of all companies, whereas Bikers is sitting at 60%. So yeah, I think part of that is also a function of, in some cases for some of the DAC companies that are featured on the list, it may be one or two co-founders with a new sorbent idea that they're working on commercializing. So it's not necessarily that each DAC company is like we imagine when we think of an Heirloom or a Climeworks, like, okay, they have this major pilot facility and they're trying to secure these huge offtakes, but a lot of DAC companies are private, like incorporated companies, but they may be very small, have very little funding, and a good number of them are honestly at risk over the next few years of either just dissolving, going bankrupt, having the founders just change course and just go do other things with their lives, or perhaps being acquired. And so, yeah, these numbers may be very much in flux.
No one should have to choose between their own safety and their pets. But nearly half of domestic abuse survivors delay leaving because they can't bring their pets with them. Purina is helping to create more pet-friendly domestic violence shelters through the Purple Leash Project, so survivors and their pets can escape and heal together. Visit Purina.com/purple to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Nature's Bounty. Nature's Bounty believes your body is brilliant, naturally designed to thrive, inside and out. For those always looking for new ways to support your health from head to heels, Nature's Bounty has a range of over 400 vitamins and supplements born from 50 years of trust and care. Nature's Bounty. It's in your nature. Visit naturesbounty.com to learn more.
Membership means more with American Express Business Gold. Earn 4 times membership rewards points in your top 2 eligible spending categories every month, including eligible U.S. advertising purchases and select media, and U.S. purchases at restaurants, including takeout and delivery. What are you waiting for? Get the card that flexes with your spending every month. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold Card. Built for business by American Express.
I am surprised to see direct air capture so prominently. On the one hand, it represents the only, what I presume to be profitable exits that have taken place within carbon removal, essentially all to Occidental Petroleum. But they're also heavily policy dependent right now with 45Q, or they need to have their eye to an acquisition by oil and gas. It seems like those are the main ways of doing things. But those are big outcomes, and not everyone is going to get a deal like that. And there's only been, 3 that I know of for Oxy that came out of that category. And it still represents here 3 out of 85. That's not a huge number. And so you're basically betting on policy and being well connected or getting one of these big offtakes. I would be scared to work at a DAC company seeing these numbers. And maybe that's a nicer way or a less nice way of saying what you just said.
Yeah, Ross. No, it's honestly, putting the list together was a little bit sobering, even though right now there's 700 total companies and there's all these companies in each space. And perhaps over the next few years, we'll see more companies spin up in each one. But when I was just looking at the numbers and just thinking about the political difficulties that we're living in, fiscal austerity, anti-climate misinformation, so on and so forth, the various issues that might be or that are facing carbon removal industry, and thinking that, okay, also a lot of these companies are startups and there's a natural base rate of failure of startups that's depending on where you set the baseline and kind of look at the stage of company, the failure rate is rather high. There's a lot of percentages out there depending on if you're looking at seed stage or Series A, Series B, so forth. But failure rates can be anywhere I've seen between 70 and 98% for new company ideas. And over a long enough term, there's even higher failure rates for a lot of companies. So yeah, looking at this list, seeing, okay, let's say there's 700 companies and let's say the rate of dissolution will be somewhat similar to the rate of new company formation over the next couple of years, which is a strong assumption. But if that's the case, but then over the medium term, we could expect 80, 90% of these companies to go bankrupt, dissolve, or otherwise be consolidated, then we're going to be left with anywhere between 50 and 200 companies. Is it really reasonable to expect that those companies can shoulder the 10 or so gigatons of annual carbon removal that we need? And I don't know, especially when a big chunk of them are biochar companies that may be limited to thousands, tens of thousands of tons per year. So it's sobering. I look at the list and we actually look at the numbers. I also feel just a little bit worried across the board.
When I'm thinking about the go-to-market and commercial strategy for any project developer within carbon removal, there's a sense that if you're alone, if you're at the bottom of this list and you're doing something that's truly unique, no one else is doing river alkalinity except for Carbon Run, you're like, okay, that's cool. You're the only person doing that. And that puts you in a position of prominence. But how valuable is that prominence relative to being a part of a solid cohort of solid sorbent DAC developers where you're able to, I'm sure there are places where they all come together or many of them come together to lobby or to increase the publicity and the reputation of their little niche. And if it's just you doing river alkalinity, how good is that relative to being a member of a tight-knit little methodological community? How do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a great point, Ross. I was thinking about this exact thing in advance of our discussion today, because it really is this wonderful pro and this horrible con. Just like you alluded to, the pro is that you're so unique. You have this pathway, and maybe you went into that pathway. Often I would imagine these companies, like if you're Cinco Labs doing oceanic bioslurries, or if you're Aquaria doing pit lake alkalinity, or you mentioned carbon run, river, it's like, I mean, you probably have a lot of conviction in that idea, in that space, that, hey, this is an unexplored space. This could be a wonderful opportunity. And then you can seize on that. You could potentially build quite an IP moat for yourself. Because if you start a new solid sorbent DAC company today, I mean, you're going to really need some kind of fantastic breakthrough to be able to have meaningful IP. Otherwise, I mean, you might discover some of the same stuff that Climeworks' 50-person chemistry team has probably already discovered and may have already patented. And so how do you carve out a moat for yourself in just this kind of pure commercial sense? Like, it's really challenging. So that's a wonderful benefit. But as you alluded to, if you're alone and you don't have a trade group necessarily to lean into, I mean, of course, if you're a company doing a rare kind of removal, you could still join a more general kind of carbon management trade group like the Carbon Business Council, and still have folks advocate for you. But it's not just about trade groups and lobbying. It's also about just the broader ecosystem that supports whatever your pathway might be. And so for DAC, and I can say this from being at DOE, but we had huge multi-year research programs trying to look into very fundamental problems facing solid sorbent DAC. And we could partially justify such investments because we could say, hey, there's X number of American DAC companies, and if we have this kind of breakthrough with our sorbents, then it could translate across a portfolio of American DAC to this amount of savings or whatever it might be. But how can you necessarily make the same large-scale investments or justifications if there's one company, one startup, not even a major corporation, one startup doing something? If you want to fund them, you may have to bundle that into a broader category. And now with that said, I did advocate, at DOE for, at times for some funding programs that may be covered like unconventional or new technologies in each removal pathway. And there are some more frontier offices like ARPA-E or the Office of Science that may investigate some of these more frontier approaches and models. And it will be smaller, kind of high risk, high reward type funding. So there is space for them. But yeah, if you're alone and you're the only one doing something, I just think it's definitely much more difficult to have that entire ecosystem of support behind you. And so it's a potential huge benefit, but I think it's a big risk as well.
I imagine if you're a VC and you're looking to invest, there's a sense that, okay, if you do solid sorbent DAC, you either have acquisition possible or just like a merger possible with many of your rivals. Like there's some, you're not just going to die and the IP gets stranded somewhere. And even on the truly unique groups at the very bottom of that list, they're all doing pretty well. It's like Breakthrough Energy Fellows. Aquari just announced something I saw the other day. Carbon Run has frontier support. Like it's not like you're smart, but there's also cases like above ground storage has been, flapping in the wind for a long time. It's failed to achieve any sort of political, diplomatic, policy support, and they don't have the institutional power behind them to turn that into commercial success. I see a lot of the people who are working on that. It doesn't seem to be going very well, at least from where I'm sitting. I think maybe that's a case where it's not working like it's working for Carbon Run. They've just been broadly abandoned, ignored by the broader carbon removal ecosystem. I realize what I just said might get me some angry emails. I'm trying to say it as neutrally as possible. No judgment, just observing what it's been like for many of these companies, perhaps.
Yeah, totally. It's challenging, and I think part of this could be the communications angle as well. Like, it's already an uphill battle to fight in terms of convincing people to do and fund carbon removal as opposed to reductions. And then for each particular high-level pathway, it's an uphill battle to explain, okay, how does bikers work? How does enhanced mineralization, or particularly ocean CDR, how does it work? And so that's yet another level that if you're trying to win support, you have to convince people to. But then if you're doing a completely unique, bespoke approach, now you're just alone in trying to convince various stakeholders in the ecosystem and even the general public. And how does this work and why should I care? And that communication angle is just going to be very challenging if you're alone, or can be.
It goes against the myth of entrepreneurship that's so powerful, which is the entrepreneur is someone who is very future oriented, visionary, can see things a decade before anyone else does. but there's a pretty long valley of death with that vision of the entrepreneur if you're trying to operationalize it. You very well might get caught in it where you have the Cassandra effect working against you, where you're a prophet that no one listens to. And maybe eventually they catch up and they look at your tombstone in the carbon removal graveyard and say, wow, that was so smart 7 years ago. Maybe now it's time for this. Not that that's especially consoling. That just might be the way that it is, and it's terrible. But that is the potential curse of visionary people, is to play the Cassandra.
Definitely. There's a scene from Westworld that we may have spoken about before where an android gets repeatedly created and tries to escape, but dies most of the time. And then like its pile of dead bodies of its past self like pile up and leave little symbols. And then when enough die, it allows, the last one to get out. I'm keeping that vague just to prevent any spoilers, but yeah, I view it as a similar idea. Like even if a company does fail, it is still perhaps valuable as long as it didn't create, horrible reputational damage to the space. Its lessons can serve as a guidepost for others. And in that sense, a place I wanted to take the conversation was talking about some of the failures that we've seen in some companies that did dissolve. And I think I keep track of inactive or pivoted or acquired DAC companies explicitly in the DAC company list. I chose not to do it for this list because the number was simply too large, and I wanted to make sure whatever I put out there was comprehensive. But it was challenging because there were numerous. There are about, say, 30 DAC companies that are in that category that keep track of in the DAC list. But there's many more, say, small biochar companies or other teams that maybe spun up, perhaps sometimes as part of the X Prize carbon removal competition as well, that are just simply not active. But it's very challenging to find data about companies that no longer exist because there's not necessarily good centralized tracking, which is what I'm partially trying to resolve with this. But I will note that there are several notable instances that can be valuable to discuss and assess. And I think one of those that I want to bring up is Alkali Earth. So they were a mineralization company trying to take steel slag and apply it as a replacement for gravel roads. And then it would carbonate over time, and they could track that. It would be all above ground. And they were actually one of my clients when I was consulting, and it was a fabulous team. I really liked their technology and their approach to things. But unfortunately, things didn't quite work out. But they have started a Substack where they are publishing lessons that they learned as part of that, just to contribute to the space so other people can see those. And I think that is just a fantastic thing to do that I think a lot of people might be afraid or feel vulnerable about. But I think it is so valuable. And I really wish everyone who has a, quote unquote failed CDR venture would do something similar, because the lessons there are extremely valuable. And that knowledge can be very helpful for all of the androids who come out there.
Yeah, I like that series too. Thanks for flagging it. And I've talked with Matt for a while about Alkali Earth. I always thought steel slag was such a fascinating thing to do. And it seems like Grant, as it often does, comes back to additionality here. And to what degree is their work actually something different from what normally happens with road building? And what a saga. I think the way that Alkali Earth was financed made it more possible to speak openly about it, where I think there's in wind down or closing, there's oftentimes much more of, you can say this, but not that. Or we agree maybe not to reveal everything for various reasons, or the company gets acquired or partially acquired, and there's paperwork involved. And so people tend to be cautious about it. There's also probably some amount of shame too. I don't want to underplay that either. I think people probably feel that way. Although that's less, because having a failed tech company is a mark of honor. I don't feel like it's harmed me at all. In fact, in some ways, it maybe helps my career, funnily enough. Josh from Noya, if you want to come hang out and talk about it, let's do it. Matt, want to talk about your articles about Alkali Earth? Let's do it. Because I like that kind of transparency. I think it's a really important thing. I think a lot of companies, it's like if one person says something, you imagine that 10 or 15 people are thinking it. I think it's a pretty common thing that I keep in mind. And I know that there are companies out there, probably people listening right now are being like, oh my God, my company's in a similar spot. We're just 6 months away from that position here. And maybe we'll see more of that. So I would also encourage, hey, if you want to come on and tell the story and share as much as you can share, open invitation to the world of developers.
Definitely. Yeah. And there's an angle to this as well of just general tech, on a sort of meta level, learning about technological innovation. And it's something that Ryan Anderson from Parallel Carbon noted for the DAC list that I made. Then he made a kind of companion Mega DAC database to start to try to track some of these technical developments for DAC over time. And it's kind of like a wonderful natural experiment we find ourselves in if we're curious about how industries develop and how technologies advance and the interplay between the private and public sector. And I feel like these kinds of initiatives of tracking companies, trying to see what's out there, but then seeing what's going well and what's not, can be of tremendous value academically as well. And there have been efforts to try to track, many efforts that are very popular about tracking the decrease in solar PV costs over time, or EV battery costs and these kinds of things. And those cost reductions are fundamental toward driving a lot of the advances we see in decarbonization today. So yeah, if we can do more to wrap our hands around what drives innovation, both at a low level technological scale, but also at an industry scale, like what drives innovation, cost decreases, and just general success of a technology, and how can we maybe leverage those potentially somewhat natural phenomena to our advantage to try to cement the industry's place and help it scale and grow. I think that's a tremendously valuable effort.
Without a doubt it is. I also like seeing people freed up to think new thoughts. One of the things that I'm pretty sure I said this on the podcast before, where I imagine it's what it's like to be divorced, where you maybe have some negative feelings, sadness, anger, resentment, but there's also a sense of liberation. You're like, oh, I don't have to have that same argument anymore. I can move on to new arguments with new people in the future. And so seeing some of the people who were at companies that closed, thinking about new types of carbon removal, I've seen people get more into solar radiation management or other types of frontier geoengineering tech that may be coming. People, there's still new thoughts. Life is going to continue. There's still amazing things out there for you, and your experience at a company trying to make carbon removal work will be valuable. People will want to talk to you about it. You will have good stories to tell future employers. It may help inspire your next nonprofit or for-profit enterprise. Something good can still happen. I think people think that the end of a company is the end of their life, and whatever's coming next couldn't possibly be as good as that one idea, but ideas are pretty cheap. New stuff is coming. Maybe you got unlucky, maybe it was a bad idea, maybe you executed poorly. You can do better next time. The world still needs your work on climate.
100%. Yeah, and anything that we get can be done to save IP, to save these kinds of lessons is valuable, because like you said, there's a lot of exogenous reasons that things can go bad. I mean, running out of cash, bad investment environment, an investor gives you bad advice, a poor key hire who leaves, just a bad luck. Like you said,
all of those things happen. Yes.
Anything.
I love thinking about contingency and the role it plays in history too. We've talked a little bit about the Bob Woodward books about the presidencies, and you're just shocked by what a person being in the room or not being in the room will impact major policy decisions. Or just, was the president hungry that meeting? Were they, and you're like, wow, so much of history, not even the current president, basically any big leader will often have. At what moment do you catch your boss when you're asking them for a raise? Imagine that, but at the heights of political power in other places. And a lot of that is outside of your control. You have no way of knowing. Sometimes it's just the roll of the dice. And it's scary to think about how much luck and contingency takes place in business and politics and everywhere else. We like to think that the world is somewhat rationally ordered, but I'm sure you feel yourself manipulated by forces beyond your control and understanding on a regular basis as well. Both of those forces are in play, right?
100%. I look back at the course of my whole life and I can trace it to these individual moments where I made one decision rather than another, often due to arbitrary reasons. But with that said, even though I hate living life by idioms, because I think they reduce a lot of complexity in the world, fortune favors the bold. And in that sense, I think it's you can work to make it the case that maybe you can take you more easily take advantage of luck when it comes, or just put yourself in a position where you can be luckier. Or in some sense too, there's a lot of like random connections between people that maybe spark an idea and a conversation and lead to something. But there are principles that we can all live by, like having a pay it forward mindset in community, or a give first. Like I think Brad Feld, the investor, is a huge proponent of this kind of give first mentality, where it's like, just connect people, give your time, just be nice rather than trying to, build a little moat around your stuff. And I think if a critical mass of people uses such a principle, it just makes it increasingly likely that there will be these random connections, random sparks that do fuel a lot of progress. And so I wouldn't say that, it's like completely out of our control. Although, of course, there are, as we're talking about, there are many things that are totally, like a neutrino can come from outer space and like knock your brain cell one way, and then, you become a psychopath killer. It can happen. And so, yeah, there are truly random things, but I think there are ways that we can use certain principles, actions, behaviors that make it easier for us to take advantage of luck.
Besides giving first and trying to be a good connector and be patient with people who may not have immediate transactional value for you personally, are there other rules that you use to give the greatest amount of space possible for positive chaos to find you?
Being open-minded.
Yeah. You probably are the single most open-minded person that I know. You're up there, Grant. You feel like that's helped you.
Thanks. Yeah. I love changing my mind, probably almost too much, but I'm also afraid because I think sometimes people who are really open-minded and are really into it often become kind of close-minded about their open-mindedness, and then it kind of can go off the rails a little bit. But yeah, I like to be reasonably open-minded. But
the part that I don't like is that I've talked about this, and we've talked about this personally before too, is I've tried to recover some of that moral authority and not be so annoyingly charitable to everyone that I no longer make a lot of moral distinctions. I'm more curious than judgmental, which is good. But the pathological version of it is the meme of the guy with the brain who turns into a chair that you're sitting on, and you're like, oh, I'm so far above the world and its problem. I'm so wise. And I think you get high on your own supply with that. And I think it can be really distorting and cause you to lose track of, oh, actually, this is just a bad thing. And people who think this thing are thinking in ways that they probably wouldn't be proud of if an analog presented itself. And unfortunately, I gave them some amount of cover by just being like, well, a reasonable person could think that. How do you make sure you're not doing that? Because I've done that. I don't like doing that anymore. I try not to.
It's extremely difficult. I think defaulting to rationality, examining your own biases, having other people help with a similar mindset help call you out is beneficial. But yeah, I find it analogous to the argument that it would be difficult for society to have all altruists or mostly altruists, because then if you introduce one psychopath into that system, if everybody's always giving them the benefit of the doubt and being nice and giving and that kind of stuff, then the psychopath just completely, or the group of psychopaths completely takes over. So like you need some kind of accountability. And I think open-mindedness is the same. If we were all just, oh, I'll entertain anything, then very manipulative actors can come in and just, run roughshod over you. So it's like, yeah, there needs to be some kind of function. So I think it's helpful to ask yourself too, is the other person arguing in good faith in this, or do they have some kind of weird incentive that they're trying to get? And I think social media distorts this very much so, because we have foreign adversaries operating bot accounts that are trying to sway American public opinion for particular outcomes. And that's like a very dangerous area where, yeah, it's probably not great to give every random tweet or Reddit post or whatever you see just the benefit of the doubt that, oh, this person's operating in good faith. I think to perhaps end the conversation on a bit of a more hopeful note, I thought it would be interesting to talk about some of the really interesting companies that I stumbled across in making the list, and what kind of company either one of us would start today in carbon removal if we had to start like a tech or project developer company, not like an ecosystem app player. Like what that would be. So before I jump into it, what's your thought on that. If you had to start a tech or / project developer company in CDR today, what would it be? What would it look like and why?
Oh, goodness. Can I just keep the money and wait for a better opportunity?
I think you got to start something today. You can maybe sit on that idea for a while, but you have to come up with the idea today, and it can morph, but not fundamentally.
One thing I keep coming back to is how much I like dedicated project development. I would probably seek out people with a lot of experience building energy and infrastructure projects of sufficient scale, use what they know about actually how deals like that get done with major corporates, and find ways to engineer projects that are likely to be recipients of offtakes and of insurance. And people are thinking this way too. And I think it's a great model. And there are various ways to do it. I like the way that Deep Sky has a bunch of different tech developers configured at the same site and is focused on scaling it. That's really interesting. I like what Residual is doing. I bet there's a bunch of other people that are doing things that I don't even necessarily know about. I like how CO280 is thinking about project development. I think all of those ways of doing it just leverage lots and lots of experience of people far beyond my own in terms of a business and getting these really big, complex deals over the finish line and just finding ways to do that. I think whatever I did, I wouldn't come about it from an idea first. I don't think I would be like, oh, I've never thought about insert new 0 people have done this thing on your list of tech here. I don't think I would do that. I think I would try to take something from 1 to 2, essentially, and do it in a big way with the learnings from what it's like working with startups. Because a lot of them are like the people who start projects are not necessarily the ones who are best at growing them either. And I think I would want to find something that was, the innovation was taking place more on the business, commercial, financial, legal layers, rather than something that was purely on the science layer. And I like that people are taking off-the-shelf technology to commercialize it in that way. So that's the methodology I would use to determine which possibility I would want to do. But also I'm like, do I have another founder experience in me right now? I don't know. It's crazy, Grant. I guess now you're at a startup right now. You're living it. You've worked at startups. You feel it. Not as a founder, but you're close enough where you have founder trauma by proxy, I think.
From all the startup stuff over the years into the engagement. But yeah, that's really interesting. And that gets me to thinking a little bit about this question of, will there even be fundamentally new CDR technologies? Or have we more or less found, are the companies that are going to be responsible for removing gigatons of CO2 in 2050 on this list today? Are the technologies that are going to be in use, or are there fundamentally new things that we can't even really imagine?
Robert Hoagland say no, we actually don't even know which ones they are yet, or they may not have even been invented yet. But something maybe you disagree.
Yeah, my intuition would say the opposite. I kind of like RMI's framing that all carbon removal is fundamentally a transformation of either biomass, minerals, or heat and energy. And if you look, it's kind of difficult to find something that goes against that framework. And if that is the framework we're working from, I think a lot of the fruits have been picked in terms of each of these pathways. Okay, what's the most efficient way to turn biomass into carbon removal? I think between biochar, BECCS, TSB, bio-oil, bioslurries, it's hard to imagine what else, and biomaterials as well, which are also on the list. It's just a little challenging for me to think, okay, what else is there? Heat and energy is obviously big, but DAC is the most brute force direct instantiation of what that can look like. And then there's things like direct ocean removal that also rely on that, but use the ocean as a vehicle or medium there. But it's it gets, as you really dive in, it's just and then I think various folks have done thinking on, okay, what's the most effective way to turn alkaline mineral feedstocks into carbon removal? And so a lot of those avenues have been explored already. So it's just a little challenging. I just feel like if I had to bet, I would say that, the best carbon removal is going to look like some evolved version, to your point of, taking something from 1 to 2, it's going to look like something that's more of an evolved or an advanced version of something we have today. It's going to be very, very effective DAC, or it's going to be some kind of unique, like mind-tailing carbonation process, or it's going to be biochar made in a particular way that and applied in particular soils or building materials that virtually guarantees long duration storage. I just feel like the things we're going to see at large scale are going to be things like that, rather than something that like we can't even imagine right now, just because so many people have already gone down so many of these roads.
Okay. Counterpoint. Can you intentionally manipulate volcanism such that new traps spring up on some huge geography and weather basically all of the carbon in the atmosphere? It's usually destructive. It's cinematic. And I think I'm the person to pull it off.
Okay. Maybe. But yeah, I mean, it's worth trying. I think believing that.
Worth trying, stimulating hundreds of thousands of square miles of basaltic surfacing.
Okay, I got you to disprove your own thing. No, but I think believing that things are impossible is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like everything should be considered and explored and on the table. Because why not? I mean, that's kind of one of the premises that we all believe in carbon removal, right? Like people tell us we're crazy, but we say, hey, but it's actually feasible due to XYZ reason. And that's kind of what gives us the hope to keep fighting for another day. And so that's not to say that every wild out there idea should get, $100 million offtake tomorrow. But I mean, things that were crazy yesterday, a lot of them remain crazy. We don't want to sample on the dependent variable too much, but there are many things that are considered crazy that like, hey, this could actually be something. So I think it's worth exploring. It's worth considering. And that's kind of the role of academics and this high risk, high reward exploratory and frontier research that we fund. But anyway, yeah, in terms of the question of if I had to do something today, I think I would pick something in the critical minerals space. Like there are a few interesting companies that have like EDEC Labs and Magrathia as well, that's doing like a carbon negative magnesium play, I believe. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing their company name correctly, but they actually raised Magrathia actually raised a significant amount of money from the Department of Defense, or I guess it's referred to by some as the Department of War now, unfortunately. But yeah, there's like a critical minerals, but also carbon removal play. And I think those are the opportunities that I find really interesting, even if the financial additionality piece might be a little shaky. But I don't think necessarily that, we need to live in the carbon credit paradigm forever. Like if we can have carbon negative materials that are profitable in their own right and like actually scalable and actually maybe have a national security and supply chain tie-in and that kind of stuff, not even just due to the current political climate, but I think those kinds of businesses would, or if they can be successful, can be more resilient. As I think maybe we've chatted about in our previous additionality discussions. So I think that's where my mind would go. It's looking for opportunities like that.
It's a more secure go-to-market than what I suggested. But I'm surprised that you would want to be involved in that. You want to be soliciting DoD money. It doesn't seem like you're a DOE guy. You're allowed to cross over like that.
Well, it wouldn't necessarily be defense critical minerals. There are many critical minerals that are valuable for decarbonization applications as well, that aren't necessarily like gallium for 6th generation fighter jets and things of that nature. So
magnesium helps people stay asleep, not to go to sleep, but to stay asleep.
Yeah.
So that's you would be helping them with that.
Hey, if you help people, it doesn't matter. I love helping people, creating utility in the world. So if it's helping people more easily, then while also removing carbon, sign me up.
Well, okay. That's clearly going in the bumper for the show. Thanks, Grant. That was weird, but I appreciate your kindness.
You're welcome.
Thanks for being here, Grant. Good to have you back.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ross, for having me back on. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's always great fun having you here. I'll put links in the show notes to your great database. It provoked some interesting thoughts in my mind, just scrolling through it. So thanks for doing that. It's I imagine quite a laborious task. So thank you for taking it on for the good of everyone here.